Hey guys, how's it going? I wanted to go over something today that I've been trying to incorporate in my music a lot more recently than I have in the past. Typically, I'm kind of because I have such bad timing when it comes to music. So following a metronome, and I know it takes practice and I need to practice that, that's for sure. But I figured out a way to take my really shitty timing and turn it into an advantage, right? And it really depends on what genre you're trying to accomplish here, right? Because if you're doing EDM, then I'm sorry, but the kick needs to be right on the grid every single time. You have very little flexibility with that because that's kind of home base. That's where people look to for the beat and the rhythm to be able to dance to. You have a little bit more flexibility with snares in EDM, so you can kind of move the snares around a little bit, but for the most part, things need to be pretty lockstep with the grid, with the timing, with the BPM. On other genres though, like rock and roll, like hip hop, boom bap, the type of stuff that I'm really into, you have a lot more flexibility when it comes to that, particularly on the kick. The snare kind of still needs to be on the beat, but you have a little bit of flexibility there, but the kick you can play around with so much more. So I'm going to take my really crappy timing skills and use that to my advantage to put together a beat that's a little bit sloppy, but it's sloppy in a way that makes it more human and more organic, as opposed to these computers that essentially just put everything on a rigid grid. And you can even hear it in the music after a while. You start to notice that things are just too perfect, too tight. So we're going to use this to my advantage. I found a sample on Splice. I chopped it up a little bit. Here it is so you can hear it. It goes on a little bit like that, and it changes up a little bit later on. But that's just kind of the sample that we're going to use to make somewhat of a hip-hop beat. How we're going to do that is we are going to record it directly into the Digitakt. I'm using the Digitakt here, but this applies to the Syntakt. If you have an analog rhythm, you don't even have to go through this much trouble because you actually have pressure sensitive pads on the Digitakt, and the Syntakt you don't. So you have to emulate the pressure sensitivity and just the velocity difference in hits using things like LFOs and maybe tweaking some settings manually. But so we're going to program this in. I'm actually going to record it live. It's going to suck, but we're going to fix it, and it's going to sound pretty good at the end. Trust me on that. All right. So if you have shitty timing like I do, I think this setup is perfect for you. If you have any questions about how I set my gear up, how I get everything to talk to my Octatrack, there's another video. I'll put that in the description and a link above. And I also have I apply some lo-fi kind of warbly effects, some wow and flutter to pretty much all of my samples in this genre. If you want to learn how to do that, I have another video. I'll put the link below in the description, and I'll link it above in the video as well. All right, moving on. So we are going to go ahead and start with a kick and a snare. All right, I'm going to first set my metronome settings. So I crank the volume way up on the metronome because I could hardly hear it, and it's useless anyway because I suck. But the active, we're going to go ahead and turn that on so that it's active, and that looks good to go. So when we hit play, there's our little metronome. Okay, perfect. All right, I've got the BPM set roughly at around 85 on my Octatrack. It's feeding the Digitakt, so you can see the BPM is going to fluctuate. I hate that it does that. Don't know a way around it. It's just MIDI technology. It sucks. There's a little bit of delay, but it's going to hover around 85. And that's fine. That's going to play into the sloppiness of this beat that we're going to lay down. All right, so I'm going to program some drums. I'm just going to do kick, snare, and hi-hat just to keep it simple and keep the video quick. All right, so in order to record on Quantize, we are going to hold down the record button and then hit play, and it says live recording. I get 4 clicks and then it started already. So I need to stop talking and start playing. So let's go ahead and start and do it again. 2, 3, 4. All right, there's our recording. It's not too bad. I could already tell I'm way off, but here, let's look at the trigs. All right, so track 2 is my snare. So my snare trigs are, see, that one was way off, so we're going to fix that one. That one was off. We're going to fix that. All right, everything else is pretty much on 5 and 13, which is kind of where I want them to be. If we hold down the trig and look at where it actually hit, you'll see the micro timing shows you that it's still way off. I'm going to bring that one a little bit closer to true. What about this one? That one's a little way off. So all I'm doing right now is just tweaking, just tweaking the placement of some of these snares so that they're a little bit closer. I don't want it exactly on the grid, but I want it pretty close to the grid. All right, that one's way off. You don't want it too far because then you just sound like a maniac who doesn't know how to play drums, which I don't, but you know, again, we're faking it here, right? Fake it till you make it. All right, so things are pretty close to the grid when it comes to the snare. Now let's look at the kick. All right, the kick should be on 1, 4, 7, and 11. All right, and on page 1, I'm way off, so I'm going to move that one over, but I know for a fact that that one needs to be a little bit closer to 5. All right, 7 is way off. Let's bring it back. My 1 should be pretty close to perfect. My 12 should be an 11, so let's get rid of that, make it an 11. And then just move it over a little bit. All right, same thing on 2, we're getting rid of that. This should be on 4, but move it over. 7 should be pretty fine. 12 should be 11, so we're moving that over. Maybe tweak it a little bit so that it's not perfect. 1, 4, 7, 11, that's pretty good. Move my 1 closer. 4 is fine. 7 is fine. 11 is fine. We're not looking for perfection, we're looking for pretty close. That's fine. That's probably off. Actually, this 4 needs to be on the right side. All right, and that 10 should be an 11, so let's just go ahead and make an 11. All right, the other thing I want to do is I want to add a little bit of swing to this. You're not going to hear it now because it's all pretty much quarter notes and I'm sorry, 16th notes, but if we add a tad of swing to this, like maybe 60 or 65, when the hi-hats come in, it'll be a little bit more noticeable. So swing definitely helps make it a little bit more human, a little bit more organic. All right, so let's hear that now all together. All right, not bad, not good, but not bad. All right, we're not going for good. We're going for slightly sloppy because, hey, you know what? If the White Stripes can do it, we can do it too. All right, so now what I need to do is I need to do my hi-hats. So that is on track 6. So let's set that up. There's my hi-hat. Let's go ahead and record that in. Again, hold record, hit play, 2, 3, 4. All right, let's see how bad that was. Not 1, 3, 5, 7. Not too bad. Not too bad. Not too bad. All right, so that was decent. I bet you if we look at the actuals, it's going to be. You know what? It's not actually. I've done a lot worse. Let's just put it that way. I even actually hit a couple on the grid, which is amazing. That never happens. All right, so it's not too bad. Let's listen to the whole thing together. All right, clearly not programmed by a machine, right? Because it's sloppy as hell, but it's also what we're going for. I'm totally cool with this. It doesn't have to be perfect. You'll notice, and let's go ahead and play it with everything and hear how it sounds in the mix. All right, you know what? I'm not mad about that. The snare on one of those tracks actually sounded pretty off. So let's take a look. This one is, let's move the snares a little bit closer to home. I like my snares to be a little bit early. So we're moving those up a little bit. And I think I got that one right. All right, so let's hear that one. All right, I thought doesn't sound too bad. I'm not entirely mad about that. All right, so we're gonna go back to our hi-hat. I wanna add a little bit of fluctuation in the velocity of the hi-hat, all right? Since we don't have pressure sensitive pads, the only way I can do that is with an LFO. So I'm gonna go to the LFO section here on track 6. We're gonna use LFO 1, all right? I'm gonna set the destination to the volume, which is on the amp, all right? So hit yes. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to crank the speed to 64, but lower the multiplier to like 2. All right, and then we're going to change the wave. I want that to be random. So we're going to get the random wave. All right, and then let's go ahead and hit play. Kill the samples. All right, now we're going to crank up the depth. I'm going to get rid of the metronome. All right, no more metronome. All right, the bigger the depth, the more fluctuation you're gonna get between the volume. You don't want it to get too much because then it starts to sound fake. So we're gonna crank this down to like 5 or 6. All right. That's not bad. So the timing's not perfect and the velocity's all over the board, which is kind of how a bad drummer would play. All right, and that's what I'm going for. At least in this instance, it illustrates the point. You can clean this up as much as you want. I'm going for organic, horrible drummer. Think Meg White of the White Stripes, because she was pretty bad. No offense, Meg. Love you, love your music, but you were a horrible drummer. All right, so that sounds decent. Now that we have that, what I want to do is, so we've got the kit going, we've got the fluctuation with the LFO. I want to add some snare hits on the 2nd and 4th bars. All right, so let me hit record. Let's go to our snare, which is track 2. All right, and let's go over to the 2nd bar. I want to add 2 hits there, and I do want to do the same on the 4th. All right, because those are kind of like fills. All right, so we are on track 2. Let's hear that. All right, so that sounds, it sounds okay. What I want to do though is on, you know what? The swing is affecting that. It's swinging a little too close together. So I'll lower the swing a little bit. All right. I want to add a ratchet on 16. All right, so what I'm going to do is on step 16, I'm going to hold it down. All right, and I'm going to press retrig up, and I'm going to change it. I want it to hit once. I want it to be a 32nd note because I want it to be twice as fast as the tempo. And let's go ahead and change the length down to a 16th. So we just get one complete hit. All right, and I can change the velocity too, but I think the velocity is fine. So let's hear how that sounds. All right, not bad. It sounded like there was an extra hit in there, so I'm going to change the length down a little bit. There we go. I like that. All right, so let's do the same thing on, shut the music off. Let's do the same thing on page 4, except I'm just going to copy that trig, hold down the trig and then click copy, and then I'm going to paste that. All right, so we have the exact same thing going on bar 4. So going back to bar 2, I don't want this to play all the time. So we're going to add a little bit of probability to this just to change it up. So this on 15, I'm going to go ahead and go to my trig, probability, and it's encoder D, and I'm going to lower that to like, I don't know, 67% of the time. And there that is. All right, and on 16, I want that to happen, let's just say a little bit more, maybe like 87% of the time. All right, so I've added my ratchet on trig 16. I've got the probability set. What we're going to do is we're going to go over to trig 16 on page 4 or bar 4 and do the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and I already added that. That looks good. My probability on 15. So now on trig 4, what I want to have happen is I also want the probability fairly high on this one. Let's just say like 87% on trig 15, but on 16, I want that to happen every time 15 happens, which means I need to set the condition to previous. So what that's going to do is that's going to say every time 15 triggers, 16 is going to trigger right after it. So 87% of the time 15 is going to go, 16 is going to trigger right after it. Let's hear how that sounds. All right, so because it's probability, it's not going to happen every single time. We're just going to have to listen to it and see if it does what we're looking for. All right, so there on the second page, it only hit 15, didn't do 16. All right, and these two are always going to play together because of the way we set it up. All right, so we've got some pretty rough beats. We've got some flexibility on the velocity of the hi-hat because we're using an LFO with a random waveform in order to get that to kind of fluctuate a little bit. So things aren't exactly kind of on the grid, which is exactly what we wanted. All right, now let's look at the mastering a little bit because I was not happy with how punchy that kick is. I'm going to take a little bit of the compression off. That's a little better. Maybe take the threshold up a little bit. All right, a little better. The compression was a little bit too thick there, making the kick a little too poppy for me. All right, so we've got that going. Now, what we need to do now is I've got 2 patterns worth of samples on the Octatrack, so I need to make another pattern here. So right now, let's hit stop. We are on pattern 1. All right, so on pattern 1, I want to copy that entire pattern. So I'm going to hit function copy, and it says copy pattern. Now I'm going to go to pattern 2, all right, and I'm going to hit function paste. All right, so now if you look, we now have trigs set up on pattern 2. So I've set up an arranger on my Octatrack to play pattern 1 and then pattern 2. So CO1 and then CO2. So let's hear how that sounds, starting with CO1. All right, I'm digging the way that sounds. It sounds a little bit more organic, a lot less on the grid-like, and it's pretty funky, and I like it. So that's how it's one way of probably a dozen different ways to add a little bit more human/organic approach to drumming on these computers that are meant to be perfect every single time. So yeah, if you have any questions, hit me up in the comments. Please please subscribe, all that jazz, so YouTube knows I'm here, and keep making music. Ciao.